Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Wednesday, April the 19th. I'd like to thank again our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith, and we're going to talk about...
Consciousness.
Consciousness, okay.
So everybody hasn't been privy to our conversations over coffee, but last show I mentioned that I was going to talk about what these Russian guys are doing with consciousness. But first, I wanted to talk about the altered states of consciousness, because we've talked about that before, and you were mentioning today that you'd seen something about how perhaps the Stone Age had a double meaning, and that it wasn't just people pushing around stones, but also they spent some of their time in altered states. And then I had seen an article about dolphins, about how dolphins like to have an altered mental state. And I think these are very interesting things, because we tend to, in our culture now, and in our consensus reality, we tend to think of people who engage in exploration of altered states as being somehow lesser, or they're druggies or something. But it's very interesting that we're not the only species that does this. So this BBC documentary, they put a webcam down with the dolphins, and they found out that dolphins like to bat around pufferfishes until they emit this neurotoxin, and then they all sort of the dolphins float up to the surface upside down and look at themselves at the surface. So there's a mirror there, and they, who knows what they're doing.
So what the story is that the dolphins push around some pufferfish. The pufferfish get angry, and they emit a kind of neurotoxin, well, something that they use to kill fish. And the dolphins use that to get high on.
Yeah, exactly. So the question comes to mind is, why isn't that part of our experience, that part of our, because it is in many cultures. I mean, the whole culture in the Amazon of the ayahuasca, the shamans take ayahuasca to be in a different realm and to bring back answers to help their tribe. And this is something that's been going on arguably for a long time. So why don't we do that?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why is it kind of
Why is there taboo?
Upon? Yeah, why is it a taboo? Why is marijuana illegal?
So do you think maybe
Fracking
it's because it might be because people would have a different point of view? I mean, if you remember what we were talking about on the other show, the plants have intelligence that can be accessed when people take these chemicals, these ayahuasca. So
well, not only that, but I remember decades ago, there was that book, we talked about it once before, I can't remember.
The Secret Life of Plants.
The Secret Life of Plants. And basically they could measure, electronically or electrically, that if somebody did something bad to a plant, then the neighboring plants would react to that. And when that person came back, they would react to him. I mean, the Secret Life of Plants. And I remember that was a big thing a long time ago, but that's been pushed completely aside, and we're constantly told that nature has, nature's just there for us to destroy.
Well, yeah, let's go. I bought this book called Formula of the Universe, and it's by Arkady Petrov, a Russian academic, and the subtitle is Bioinformation Technologies for the 21st Century, Cosmopsychobiology. So this book is more on, it's from another point of view of the what's going on with looking at the shamanistic view of the universe. They're accessing altered states just natively by, they don't even have to do anything, but they can get into an altered state where more than one person is in a vision space, and they can diagnose people who have diseases and cure them. So they're trying to create a model for how this works. And so they call this other space the information domain. And the way I like to think about that is that, if we have something, we can represent it as the thing itself, but we can also have information about it. So if we look at language, we can say, there's a dog. Okay, so there's a dog sitting there. That's the material object. We can represent the dog. We can say DOG in English, and that means dog. Or we can have a Chinese character, which is also a representation of the dog. Now those are just tokens that represent the dog, but conceivably we could have more information about dogness wrapped up in that picture. So Sanskrit, for example, is a language that is an object-oriented language. It starts at a very top level, defining all things that exist in the universe in any realm, in the material realm or the spiritual realm, and then it goes down from there. And what they say about Sanskrit, the people who teach it, is that it's actually a creative language, so that the vibrations of speaking Sanskrit somehow activate matter and can create things. So that's the idea. Whether or not that's true or not doesn't matter for this discussion. It's just saying that there's the possibility that could happen, that the universe that we live in is created real time around us by consciousness and vibration. So an analogy of that is that how is a rainbow made? Well, all these raindrops are falling down and energy shines through them, and this rainbow is created by just the fact that all these raindrops are falling down to the earth. So are the raindrops conscious of creating the rainbow? Probably. Well, we can't really answer that question, but presumably for our picture, they're not. They're just doing it. So that's kind of the picture that the Russians, these guys, have of how we operate in our space, is that the universe is being created dynamically by us, by every sentient being in the universe, real time, and that we have this ultimate power to be able to control that, but we just don't know how to do it because we're not conscious of those abilities. So they're trying to teach people how to access those abilities, and they're fairly successful at it. So that's a
Wow.
really interesting thing that's going on over there. And one of the things, it doesn't say it in this book, but in one of the books that Arkady Petrov has written, he and another fellow named Igor Arepiev started an institute to teach people controlled clairvoyance. And when they first started, they had to vet each person very carefully because some people wouldn't be able to do it. They would know by their basic structure, belief system, that they wouldn't be able to do it. But now, evidently, they can teach anybody to do these things.
What is clairvoyance?
Clairvoyance is the ability to see from an inner. Well, the model I use to explain it, because this is, we're out in woo-woo space here, and so the model that I use is that the pineal gland, which looks like an eye structurally, but it's embedded on the inside of our head, somehow gets activated and responds to wavelengths that we can't measure or that we're not aware of. I mean, this is old stuff. It's been around for thousands of years. You can read about it in Greek. But
what does clairvoyance mean?
It just means that you're able to see on a different level. You're able to see reality from a different point of view. And the way they describe it is you're seeing things in the information domain. So you're actually seeing the structure behind our physical universe. So when you change something, like when they're healing a disease, they're not really pushing around atoms anymore. They're restructuring the way that the person comes into being real time. So in other words, you have to accept, this model says that the only thing that exists is now. There's nothing else. The future, the past is it's something that was but is no longer, and the future has to be created.
So this table and these cups and the paper that's on it.
Mm-hmm. There's information and energy that's constantly that's constantly available, and somehow the energy coalesces to form a table made by matter. And so what I'm saying is, we can't with our neocortex, we just can't get around that. We can't see how that works, but we can make pictures to explain how it works, and our right brain can understand it a little bit better if we use a picture. So when I say the raindrops are falling down, the light shines through them, and there's a rainbow. Okay, so something like that similar is happening. There's energy present in our universe, and you and I agree that that table is there, and everybody else in here agrees that that table is there, and there are a lot of sentient other beings or creatures in here that create that table. But it's all like we're singing a song together, and it's in harmony, and it creates the table. Okay. Does that see that we're getting in the problem? And Petrov identifies this very clearly, is that we're trying to analyze things with our neocortex that are outside of its ability to understand.
Okay, but earlier we were talking about some kind of more specific happening today issues, I think.
Yeah.
This is before we got here. So can you take these ideas and put them into one of those things?
it's going to be pretty hard for me to do that point blank on the spot here because I didn't think about that.
Okay.
I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about analogies, and I would like to do that. Maybe we could do that on the next time I come on the show, because it's very difficult stuff to think about. And the thing is that it's outside of the time-space reality that we have. And so I confess that it's hard for me to access this stuff. And I read about it and I think, well, here's an example. Okay, so the shamans, when you take this ayahuasca or DMT, typically people meet a snake and the snake talks to them and tells them stuff.
So you mean people take ayahuasca, which is a drug,
Yeah.
and lots of people have exactly the same.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, the same, they access something that's similar. I mean, each person will access something different depending on their makeup, but typically there's a snake.
Interesting.
So the snake, can be an image, it can be the symbol for knowledge or whatever. But the whole thing is that this comes through in a symbolic language. And so that's the same thing with this. They're saying that what happens is you eventually learn when you become able to handle that. I mean, it's a big deal when from what I've read, I haven't done this stuff, but I've accessed this space from meditating and from doing a flotation tank. It's very similar. I mean, I get the same things. The same things happen to you. So anyway, there's this, when you first access this space, it's scary. I mean, a snake comes up to you and stands in your face, you're going to be scared, right? So you have to get over that. But we're kind of programmed to just not worry about those visions that we're capable of receiving through this half of our brain. We're told, let's work on this half of our brain, and anything that shows up there, it's for artists, musicians, that kind of people, but they can't make any money.
Well, what is this half of our brain?
Well, it's the artistic
one we're
side.
So the one we're always told to focus on is
the left. It's the cognitive side that's locked in time, that lets us do mathematics, that lets us do all these cognitive skills and functions. And these guys are going more into the vision side, where everything is symbols, everything is pictures. It's not linear. You see a picture and the sequence isn't important.
In our school system, which side of our brain are we taught to use? Only.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
Well, no, I mean, and so that's why this whole thing is so fascinating, is because the few people from our culture who do show up and figure this stuff out are they're pretty quickly disenfranchised from the mainstream, because now they've taken drugs, so there's something wrong with them. I mean, and a scientist who's gone down to the Amazon and taken ayahuasca, and who comes back and says, reality really isn't the way we think it is. And I mean, there's Dennis McKenna, Terence McKenna's brother, he's an academic. He came back, and I think he said that the message to him was, you monkeys just think you're in charge. So, when you start getting stuff like that, and these intelligent people who are in our system and who are our leaders, and they say, time out, we got to change our models. I pay attention to that. And John Perkins, for example, who used to work for the CIA, his whole thing is we have to envision our new world, the world that we want to live in. Well, that doesn't sound very practical to a guy like me. I mean, that just sounds like he's taken too much ayahuasca.
But maybe it'll work.
But now I read these guys, and they're saying the same thing in a different way. They're not taking ayahuasca, but ayahuasca is DMT, and DMT is generated by the pineal in the absence of light. You can go on this ayahuasca trip without taking anything. In Thailand, there's a meditation center, and you can go in there and spend 3 days in the dark. And you're at that point, after you've been in utter darkness for 3 days, your pineal starts emitting DMT, and you're on a trip. And you
turn off the lights.
Yeah. So I mean, this is what's happening. I think that this is probably the most important thing that we have to look at, because the problems that we're facing are frankly impossible. They are impossible according to our science. I mean, we could argue about it. You could get some PhDs in here, and they'd tell me, they'd slaughter me, and I'd be
just push you out the door.
Yeah. I can't. I'm not going to.
But I would agree with you.
But I'm just saying, it's really interesting, this stuff. For some reason, I read a book like this, which is very difficult for me to read because the translation's so poor, but then I can see things from a different point of view. And I think that's what each of us needs to do, is just kind of get to where we see things from a different point of view, and we don't say, well, bumblebees can't fly because science has proven that they can't fly, so they must not be able to fly. I mean, he gives an example in here of how science is kind of like the church in some ways. And I think it was in the 18th century in France, the Academy of Science in France declared that rocks could not fall from the sky. And so if somebody said, well, a rock came through the ceiling, a meteorite came through and hit my dog and killed him, they'd send a team of scientists out there and educate them. Rocks can't fall from the sky. So instead of looking at the phenomenon and trying to analyze it and figure it out, they just ignore it, which is essentially what we do. And our science now is focused on monetary gain. There is no pure research anymore. You can't get a no strings attached grant to study something. It's from a company that wants to pay for it, and you better come up with something so they can sell something. So I mean, the pure research has kind of gone by the wayside. Anyway, that's kind of a scattered explanation. I know we've only got 2 minutes left, but how does that sit with you? What do you think about all this stuff? Anything jumping out?
Well, I mean, these are things I never talk or think in these terms, but when you say it, I like it. I kind of like the ideas it puts out there, which are ideas I never have.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't like to think that our situation is hopeless, or that the bad guys can do whatever they want. And I think this is what's happening, is that, I just sent you an article about how Mark Twain had an experience 150 years ago where he saw his brother in a vision. He saw his brother die. And even after it happened exactly the way he saw it in a vision, he didn't want to write anything, he didn't want to release anything about it until after his death, even though he found it fascinating, just because he didn't want the grief from the press, right? I mean, Now, I find that interesting, that even 150 years ago, it was like that. Yeah. I mean, it shows you where we are, really. If you have anything that's unorthodox, you're going to get slammed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But right now, we need the unorthodox.
We need it. We need some people who are willing to go see if you do fall off the edge when you sail.
Yeah.
Because we are going through a change of model that's like that. It's that revolutionary.
Yeah, like, hold on. Will Smith, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching this week's Citizens Forum.